Welcome back for another video. I'm Eharbad, a free-to-play endgame player in Raid Shadow Legends. Today we have the favourite advanced quest of them all, use one Hydra key. So whether we like it or not, today we have to get Hydra done. I think having already done my hard key, which I did do full auto, I've got to the point where I don't have to manual hard at all. I still have to manual brutal. And last week I did semi-auto Nightmare. It's basically, as long as Torment isn't there, it's kind of auto-friendly, but the AI is still a little bit stupid. So it's probably overall still better to do it manual, and then just once we got the one key, we'll hit auto or we'll just quit. It doesn't really matter. We're not yet at the point in the clan where we're downing Nightmare, so doing additional damage to ensure we get the clear isn't necessary at this stage. So I just get the one key and then I tap out. Also, before we jump into looking at the builds and the run, we have 3 graphics that I've created to try and help people looking at their own Hydra teams, building new Hydra teams, and just some general observations and considerations that I've come up with. Now bear in mind, this is really focused more at Brutal and Nightmare. It's less important during Normal and Hard, so do keep that in consideration. This advice is not tailored towards Normal or Hard Hydra. Really, it's tailored towards Brutal and Nightmare. So the most important mechanic I would say is AoE decrease speed. We need to be able to outcycle Hydra. So every time Hydra takes a turn, we have the countdown timer on the consumption ticking down, and between each consumptions, the turn count before the next consumption is shorter, and during the consumption, we end up having shorter and shorter periods to unlock the champions, to free the champions. So the more, if we can slow down Hydra, we can fit more turns in between each Hydra turns. It's extremely important in Brutal and Nightmare to ensure that, such that we're able to get sufficient damage per turn, and so we're able to cycle our own abilities. And I would say decreased speed on Hydra is more impactful than increased speed on you. If you have decreased speed on Hydra, you can actually maintain decreased speed on Hydra at 100%. You don't need a debuff extender. Increased speed in yourself, you can't maintain as easily. It can be stolen, etc. There's more problems with buffing yourself with increased speed, putting decreased speed on Hydra. The second most important mechanic to bring, in my opinion, is Provoke. If you can counter the Decay head and stop the AoE cleanse and life barrier from being used, greatly improves your ability to win this fight. It allows you to maintain control rather than having to constantly battle to get control back. With that in mind, the third most important thing, in my opinion, to bring is a form of mischief tank, a way to deal with mischief. For the same reasons as the decreased speed and the provoke, if we can stop mischief from buff stealing and from turn meter stealing, we can maintain control of the fight, and we can delay or reduce the frequency at which Hydra is taking turns. We don't want that TM steal from Mischief, because then Mischief will take more and more turns, we will take less turns. We want to be outcycling Hydra. Then kind of the next bracket of important buffs to bring, and I would say particularly these 3 buffs, there are ways of beating Hydra without them, but they are generally pretty important. That's block buffs, AoE, which counters blight, and also helps reduce the impactfulness of wrath and suffering. Decrease attack, really with the focus on wrath. If wrath isn't in the starting lineup, there are ways of getting around not having decrease attack. You can also use things like Geomancer's passive to reduce the damage Wrath does. You could run AoE Strengthen to reduce the damage. So again, like there are ways of getting around it if you don't have it. Hence, I'm putting it in the second category, but it's still pretty important to bring a mechanic to deal with the damage, particularly from Vengeance. Increase speed for yourself. I think we've discussed the reasons for that when we were looking at decreased speed. And then the nice to haves, but again, there are ways of dealing with the fight with if you don't have them, is decreased defense and weaken. Now you see, I don't run weaken in my team. I don't have AoE weaken. I have a single target weaken through Geomancer, and I have AoE decreased defense. So like they're nice to have, but you can get around it without. For instance, if both your DPS champions are Geomancers, you don't really need the decreased defense on the enemy so much. And then lastly, two kind of mechanics that are definitely nice to have, but again, you can get around not having them, would be a Torment solution and block debuffs. And typically, if Torment is in the starting lineup, you really do want a Torment solution, and there aren't many of them. It's basically Bale and Shamil. Now, if we look over at the Hydra heads themselves, I've kind of listed the ones that I think are the highest priority for you to ensure that you counter them and what those counters are. So personally, I think Decay and Mischief are the ones you have to counter. You need to build into your team a way of dealing with those two heads. And that basically means you've got Provoke somewhere within your team, and you have a champion with resistance and an extra buff to deal with Mischief. Then Blight and Suffering we can largely counter via block buffs. And I think that's the next most kind of important thing to look at. And then Torment and Wrath via the kind of mechanics that we've mentioned there. Those would be the next ones I'd look to bring. Wrath is kind of having a decreased attack is more important once you hit Nightmare than any other level. It's reasonably important at Brutal, but it really doesn't matter before then. So this one's kind of a bit more generalized at multiple difficulties. The rationale is still there. And then I've also tried to give an indication of which heads I prioritize killing. And in this instance, the lower the number, the higher the priority. So I focus on killing typically Decay and Mischief first. Then I look at killing Suffering and Torment. And then I usually leave Wrath and Blight for last. Partly that's because I run Geomancer as DPS, and if the heads are doing AoE hits, then I'm getting more procs of Geomancer's passive. So I tend to leave the AoE heads until last. If we quickly look at my team that I'm going to be showing in Nightmare, here's the graphic that kind of explains the reason for the composition and kind of the critical aspect. I would say in this particular composition, Skull-Lord and Kimmy are hypercritical. They're bringing the most important mechanics in the fight, bar none. Geomancer and Royal Guard are really there purely for damage. They could be replaced with many other damage dealers. It wouldn't really matter that much. Ugo is pretty important as well, but not as important as Skull-Lord and Lady Kimmy to this composition. I've got Duchess as kind of the next level beyond Ugo in terms of critical support within the fight. It is slightly dependent on which the starting heads are. So when Torment is there, obviously having Duchess, Rector, or Shamil becomes even more important. There are ways around it, but it is much more difficult if you don't have a Torment counter. Rector, I think, could work as a substitute into this composition, but it would be a little bit more susceptible to RNG and might be more difficult as a result. And then the DPS can basically be swapped around without any real worries. You could run Husk, you could run Royal Guard, you could run Geomancer, you could run even Ninja. I have one keyed Nightmare with Ninja there. You could run Sakir, you could run Acresia. Like, the DPS slots are very interchangeable in this composition. Right then, let's jump onto the builds. So my Duchess is built purely for Arena, and it works well enough in Hydra that I haven't felt the need to change the build at all. Rector, I do believe, would work in this exact composition and would be effective enough to one key as long as you don't get the bad RNG, but I don't think Rector would have the same recoverability that Duchess does when RNG doesn't go your way. In terms of sets, I'm running Swift Parry and Speed. In terms of stats, I have quite a fast Duchess with very high effective HP and decent resistance. Skills are obviously done, and the masteries are a full-on arena style mastery build. Now, what would be optimum if you're going full Hydra for Duchess? Probably Reflex, I would say, if I had to pick. In terms of Skull-Lord Vargal, we have Reflex and Perception as the gear sets. In terms of the stats, again, high effective HP, good speed around the sort of 230 to 250 area is what most of the champions in this composition have. Enough resistance to be the Mischief tank, and enough accuracy to land the important debuffs on Nightmare. You could obviously scale down the stats if you were focusing on building this team for Brutal. Skills are booked. You don't need to book out the A1, but you do need the A2 and the A3 booked. In terms of masteries, I've gone to Warmaster for damage. I've gone to Lasting Gifts to try and extend my own Strengthen and then allow Skull-Lord Vargal to be an easier Mischief tank. And I've gone for Master Hexer to try and get longer duration on the decrease attack. Otherwise, we've gone for any kind of masteries that will help us cycle more quickly and get back to our skills more quickly. So we've got Cycle of Magic and Arcane Celerity. The other thing to mention is I do have a Blood Shield accessory on Skull-Lord. I do think that's important, particularly as Duchess does put out a shield buff on herself and the champion with the lowest HP. So to ensure that Skull-Lord also has that buff on him, we have the Blood Shield accessory. In terms of Lady Kimmy, triple perception at the moment. This is not a build that is really arena focused. It's not really focused on anything, to be honest. It's just kind of like a jack of all trades build. So we've got decent effective HP, by no means the highest you could get. High accuracy, enough that I can use her in arena on an occasion, and a reasonable resistance level. It was kind of a hybrid build because I wasn't sure exactly what I'd want to use her for. So I kind of just gave her good overall gear, and at some point I might rebuild her in a more specialized way. Again, for Hydra, I would say either Reflex or Relentless would be optimum. Skills are booked, and in terms of masteries, it's really an arena-oriented mastery tree that I have for her, but it does work within Hydra. Again, ideally, if she was dedicated to Hydra, we would go down Warmaster. We'd probably get Lasting Gifts. We would keep Master Hexer. I think we'd end up with a build very similar to that which we have for Skull-Lord. We'd probably try and get Rapid Response and Arcane Celerity, and drop Swarm Smiter as well. Royal Guard, this one is in Reflex. I do have a Relentless Royal Guard, but I use him in Nightmare. I've got 2 refresh accessories currently on Royal Guard. Ideally, I would get a third at some point. We have pretty good speed at 232. I have noticed occasionally that because Royal Guard is a couple of speeds slower than Skull Lord, that the buff distribution can sometimes go a little bit iffy. So I might look to give Royal Guard just 3 more speed, get him ahead of Skull Lord. That is something I could do. 100% crit rate. I've tried to get around sort of 250 crit damage and then focused on effective HP thereafter. This Royal Guard I don't use really for his debuffs. I do like having Royal Guard with a bit of accuracy, particularly as a redundancy on the A3 for decreased speed and the decreased decreased defense on the A1. But for me, I didn't prioritize that stat on this Royal Guard. Skills are obviously all done. I picked Cruelty. In the long run, I will go for Crushing Rend, but Crushing Rend is only going to be worthwhile once Royal Guard is 6-star awakened. Until then, I think Cruelty will be better. And then in terms of masteries, gone down to War Master for the extra damage. I have got the Master Hexer and Sniper, although in this particular build, they are not really required. I've got Cycle of Magic to try and get back to the A2 faster. And then I've left the last point undecided, as it ultimately would depend where else I might end up using this Royal Guard. But there would be arguments for either Evil Eye or Lord of Steel. So I think you could go either way. In terms of Geomancer, we have Reflex and Perception. In terms of total stats, high effective HP, good speed, like pretty good speed, and currently more accuracy than is required, as I was using this Geomancer in Twins with a Mithrala lead. So I could look to rebuild this Geomancer and drop the accuracy back down to sort of the 350 mark and either make him a bit quicker or add more effective HP. I'm not sure, but I will at some point look to rebuild him. It's not a priority, as it does the job as it is. So why spend the silver? In terms of skills, they are done. And in terms of masteries, the same mastery set that we saw on Skull Lord. I have this mastery set on quite a lot of debuffers in Hydra. I have it for Skull Lord, I have it for Geomancer. Well, actually Skull Lord has the Lasting Gifts version instead of the Sniper version, but broadly the same. And in fact, Ugo has the same. The only difference with Ugo is I went for Blade Disciple instead of Deadly Precision, as Ugo gets higher benefit from Blade Disciple. As mentioned, Ugo is in Perception and Relentless. And in terms of total stats, high effective HP. Do want to have high HP on Ugo for the heal. Pretty quick and enough accuracy to land the debuffs. The skills are done. The heal here does give us a little cleanse. It's a redundancy against Torment and does remove the heal reduction that we get placed on us. So it's pretty good. Plus the overall 20% heal. Like it does help quite a lot. This is I like this kind of configuration for Ugo. I would recommend it. And those are all the builds. So from here, let's jump into a run and see how it goes. I do have Duchess with Brimstone for a bit of extra damage. This team would one key without Brimstone. It has for a number of weeks. In terms of the AI, I have turned off Geomancer's A2 and I've turned off Royal Guard's A3 and I've prioritized Kimmy's A2. Let's just jump in and I will let it basically run on auto for the first turn and then I'll take control. And the priority here, we want to avoid getting Brimstone on Decay, because Decay will be provoked the entire time. We don't have Hex up, so we can't necessarily hit Mischief. We aren't veiled on Duchess, so we can't hit Torment, so we're going to have to go for Wrath and try and get Brimstone there. Then with Ugo, I'll target Wrath. I'll try and get the Vengeance proc quite early, and that will give me additional damage back against the heads. We will have to go for a second provoke here. Do want to get decrease attack on before Vengeance procs. I will accept the fear on Kimmy. Ugo, let's go and A1 and decay, get the leech up there. Given that we've got the brimstone out, we know we're safe to go after decay. And although we're in reflex, I'm actually going to use the A2 just to avoid getting feared. I'll get feared, but I'll remove it with Ugo. I do want to get the decrease attack up. Now we've got the decrease attack up, Vengeance will proc momentarily. We'll use Ugo to clear that debuff off us. And as a secondary priority, I'm going to go after Mischief, and then I'm probably going to go after Torment. Provoke out again. Now that you've kind of understood the basic prioritization within the run, the cycle I'm going to be doing, what I'll do now is put some music on, kind of play it in double speed, and bring you back when there's something interesting to show, which is probably going to be close to when we get, say, past the 100 turn mark. Up until then, we should maintain pretty good control unless we get some really bad RNG. Now, with Mischief and Decay down, I'm going to hold off using the A2 and see which these two heads pop back as. With Duchess, I also should avoid attacking the downed heads, as Smite does not work. With everyone else, I focus on Mischief, as he has the lowest defense, and I'll do the most damage to his severed head. A little bit annoying with Skull-Lord being the next one to be eaten, to then have Decay pop, like that is suboptimal. What I'm going to do now is actually allow Decay to cleanse before Skull-Lord is eaten. So when Skull-Lord is eaten, the cleanse will be on cooldown. So I'll hold off using my A3 on Geomancer until that's been done. Equally, I'll hold off using my A2 with Ugo. We'll let the cleanse happen. I'll use A3 on Kimmy instead, again, hold back the A2. Basically, I'm just going to get myself into a position that I'll be able to still be in control of the fight once Skull-Lord has been eaten. Duchess, I'm now going to go after Suffering, who will take more turns. Royal Guard, I'm going to hold back the A2. We know Torment will get Life Barrier. Again, that lack of decrease attack is really causing us some problems here. It's early enough in the fight that we'll still get through this, but it's pretty bad RNG overall. It's a good reflection of kind of what can go wrong. Like, I've had many times where we don't get a single death in the entire key, and in this, it's not been so smooth. So we've got Skull-Lord back now. Now we're going to go after the Life Barrier. Fortunately, we were unable to. This is pretty insane how bad the RNG has been. I think after a very long time, we've kind of managed to regain some kind of control. So, despite the fact that we've had probably one of the worst RNG runs I've done in months, it still looks like we're going to reach the 1 key, do it inside half an hour. So it's kind of like, it's not great, but at least you can see that as long as you keep a steady head, you don't let yourself get kind of waylaid by what's going on or disheartened, you can overcome really bad RNG. Importantly though, we've reached the 1 key. I'm going to hit auto, let it play out. And all I've really got left to say, is thanks for watching. Not a clean run, but I did want to show you my Nightmare team, show you a run, and I made the decision that whatever happened in the run, that's what we'd show. So no matter how good or bad the run went, we would be effectively honest with what happens. You could see that, even a good team that's well built, well composed, is subject to RNG. But I think the mark of having a strong team, which I believe this one is it works in every rotation. And even if you have bad RNG, you can overcome the RNG itself. I think that's the mark of having a strong team, that you'll still get the 1 key, even when things don't go to plan. And as I say often, I would rather run on manual once than on auto 10 times. So once again, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Any feedback is always welcome. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now.